I'm Bethany Anderson, and you're listening to The Hope Adventure. Welcome to episode 51. The Hope Adventure is a place for God's stories and conversations, all with the intent of reminding us that the greatest adventure is His presence. And His presence is embedded with hope. Hey guys, I know it's been a while since we've been together here on the Hope Adventure podcast. I took a few months off for a sabbatical and really needed that time to brainstorm and dream about what's next for my season of life, for my work, for my ministry, and for this podcast. So I started 2021 off in one of the world's most beautiful places, Maui. It was such a gift from God to go and be taken into wide open spaces, to be surrounded by beauty and nature, and just really, really connect with Him, because I am going into a season of pouring out into those who feel like they've been pouring out of an empty cup. And so I went to be filled. I had some friends fly me out there to Maui them. They have been a huge blessing to my ministry and to my life. And what a way to start a new year, for sure, especially in the middle of a pandemic. So praise the Lord for that opportunity. And I just want to say I have some really big changes coming up. I launched the Hope Adventure, my new business, my new ministry, back in January from Maui. And then God told me to put the pause button on so that He could incubate the dream of what that's supposed to be. I have so much more clarity and vision about what that's going to look like in the coming months, and it's going to be radical and really exciting, and it's going to involve all of us in collaboration in a spirit of working together, and I can't wait to tell you more about that in the coming days. So stay tuned. Check out my new website, www.thehopeadventure.com. Make sure you sign up for my email list to stay up to date with this radical thing that's coming your way. Also, make sure to follow The Hope Adventure on Instagram. Okay, so for today, I am jumping back into the Hope Adventure podcast with a series on singleness. So many of you know that I'm single. I've never been married. And something that I've realized is that the further along I go in my singleness, the more taboo the topic becomes with friends and family. It's like people don't really know how to ask about your singleness. It's a very countercultural way to live. And yet there are more singles in the world than there ever have been, just because divorce rates are so high. That's another topic. But today I have invited a new friend, and I'll tell you how we met. It's a funny story. We go into that in this episode. David Bruhlmann, he's just released a book on April 12th called Single for a Season, and it is a guide for Christian singles. It is extremely practical and encouraging. And one of the biggest things is it says, hey, you're not alone in your singleness. We can do this together, those of us that are single. And it's such a good reminder to live a life of thriving and abundance, and not just waiting for that person to come into your life, but to really maximize and live your life to the fullest. So that's what we're talking about today. We're digging into some hard questions around singleness and dating. And I think that I'm going to be talking about this for a couple episodes. I just feel like it's a really important topic that not a lot of people in the Christian world are talking about. And so I would love to invite you to just pay attention, see if there's something that you can gain, whether you're single, married, whatever your season is. I know there's encouragement in this for you. And especially if you know someone in your life who's single, send this to them. Our prayer, David and I's prayer, is that it would be an encouragement and a blessing to them. So let's jump in to my conversation with David Bruhlmann, author of Single for a Season. To the Hope Adventure podcast. Thanks for being on the show.
Hi, Bethany. It's an honor to be here on the podcast.
Awesome. Well, we are going to talk about singleness today and the season that you and I are both in and have both been in for a long time. We may give our ages away on here. It's probably valuable for people to know. But I want to know a little bit about you, and if you can just share just a little bit of your story and how we ended up maybe on this podcast together tonight, on a Friday night, my time, Saturday morning, your time.
Exactly. Wonderful. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to introduce myself. I have been, yeah, as you said, a long-term single, which is actually great and was also challenging at the same time.
Yeah, I hear
But
that.
I do see today really the advantages of this season. I got to do so many things, and I love to travel. I love to start new projects. I love to move forward to the kingdom of God, and I think my singleness really helped me to do that and to do it at a much larger scale, which is really amazing. So it was in my workplace, it was in the church, in ministries. Yeah, I feel really blessed to be single. And yeah, how do we meet actually? This is actually quite funny because
Yeah, it's true.
it's so funny. A friend of mine reached out to me last year asking me if I wanted to start a mastermind, and we hadn't been talking for probably 15 years or so. We just completely
Really?
lost track. Yeah, a really long time. Yeah. We met
Wow.
in Switzerland in Lausanne, and then we moved on with our lives. And I said, well, great. Actually, I had been looking for that exactly, and so we started to do a mastermind. And in this process, he said, well, you should meet Bethany because she has a similar ministry and similar goals, and you guys should collaborate. And yeah, long story short, that's now why we're here in this podcast.
Which is funny because many people who listen to this podcast know that I've lived in different places around the world. And one of the places that is absolutely, and I don't just say this because I'm talking to a Swiss person, that's most near and dear to my heart is Switzerland. And so you and I were actually there at the same time. Um, I was there, gosh, 2003, 4 through 8, 2008. But we didn't know each other, but we know this mutual friend of ours. And it's funny because the rest of that story is that he connected with you and then he sent me an email just a couple months ago. And when he introduced us, I was like, I already follow this guy on Instagram and I have no idea how I was following you on Instagram. But I knew already that you were writing a book on singleness. And so we had kind of virtually connected and then he connected us and then we got on the phone and we just started dreaming about how could we collaborate. And part of that collaboration result is what we're doing right now.
Right.
So we've talked about you are Swiss. So why don't you say where you're from and, is that where you grew up or did you travel and live other places as well?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Swiss. I grew up in the I'm Swiss. I grew up in the Zurich area, so I'm Swiss German. Then for university, I moved to Lausanne, the Swiss French part. And that's where I stayed probably, yeah, the other half of my life, a very long
Yeah.
time in Lausanne. It's such a beautiful region. I really love it. And I did travel a lot as well. So I love to travel. I call myself an international person because I lived in the States when I was 17. I went there to high school, and during my studies, was a year in Canada, in Ontario, and then once I finished my studies, I went to Ecuador, serving in the ministry there, learned Spanish, and now for actually it's 1.5 years now. I've been living in Cambodia in Southeast Asia, which is amazing too. It's a wonderful country, really amazing.
So how many languages do you speak?
Well, I have to count. I think it's probably five now. Five languages. So currently, I'm learning the local language here in Cambodia, Khmer, which is quite a challenge. It's a totally different
I bet.
alphabet. Nothing. There's no link whatsoever with the Western language, but it has been quite fun.
It sounds like an adventure. Okay, so you speak
So,
Swiss German, English, obviously. You speak
yeah,
French,
French,
Spanish,
yes, Spanish,
and then
German as well. So Swiss German and German are not the same languages. It's probably like Spanish and Portuguese, very close, but
mhm.
still a bit different. And yeah, now I'm learning Khmer. so the local language here in Cambodia.
Okay, so just so you know, that was 6.
Oh, is it 6 already?
Somebody, if somebody asks you, it's funny because when somebody asks me how many places I've lived around the world, I do the same math. And I'm always like, is it 5? Is it 6? And it sounds like you're at a similar number as well.
Well, yeah.
If you, yeah, I don't want to make you do the math quickly. Okay, well let's dive in. So first I want to say that you have a book that is coming out on April 12th. It's called Single for a Season. And let's just kind of dive in. We'll talk about the book a little bit more later on, but let's just like dive into singleness. And I want to ask you a question. It's a question I get a lot. I'm really curious what your answer is. So just for those of you listening to the podcast, David and I are both in our 40s, and some of us in our earlier 40s than the others. But so we're coming at this from the angle of two people who've been in ministry, who've lived around the world. We're not in our 20s anymore. And so we've lived a lot of life as singles and in ministry. And I'm sure we have a lot of similar questions. We've actually talked about some of this before. But the question I get a lot is, why aren't you married yet? So that's
Very
my
good
question.
question.
That's my question, just right out the gate.
That's a very good question. It's a very easy question and it's a very difficult question at the same time. So
Okay.
I also did get this question a lot of times. And it is, well, let's say it like this. If I had the answer, I would tell you the answer, and I probably, if I found the answer, I would not be single like anymore. That's a bit
Okay.
my
Okay.
my
Okay.
reasoning. So probably, well, no, but I think it's not a good way to reason, because I think I have had this question a long time, and I was really wrestling with this question, thinking that something was wrong with me. Like, am I still single? Like, why can't I find someone? And also a lot of friends told me, like, David, you look at her or her, like, why, like, are your expectations too high? Or, well, like, go for it, And at the same time, as I've been thinking about this question, I was like, no, actually it's not, because something is wrong. Maybe there's a purpose behind. Or maybe it's just because right now, and that's why I love this concept of seasons, it's just a different season. And it's a good thing, actually. And then instead of looking actually at why, like the problem, like, are there things wrong with me? I did obviously do counseling, which is great, which is awesome. But I
Yeah.
came to the conclusion actually that nothing was wrong. It was just not the time yet. And then instead of looking actually what was wrong, I was like, okay, I want to see if there is a purpose behind, or if there is something I should do in this season while I have so much freedom, I have so much energy, and I have more resources, so I can use the money I'm earning for myself. I don't have to feed my family, for instance.
Yeah.
And yeah, you see, it was actually a journey, actually, this question, and but I still don't have like a precise answer. It's just, I think what I would say, it's just not the time yet.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because you said it's a simple question, and it's also really a complex question in a lot of ways, because for me, when people have asked me that question, I know they're well-meaning, but it also speaks to their belief about God's sovereignty. I mean, that's how I take it. It's like, listen, at the end of the day, if I was supposed to be married, I would be married. And there's a
Yeah.
reason that I'm not, and I may not know that reason. But I think as we grow and go through life, and perhaps even being in seasons we don't really want to be in for long periods of time, we can still learn and grow. And I know you and I have talked about, you and I both have a very nomadic kind of calling. And so you've traveled around the world, you've been in lots of places. So have I. I had a 13-year-old girl 3 months ago say to me, Bethany, I want to be like you when I'm older. And I'm like, what 13-year-old girl says she wants to be single when she's 40, you know? And
Mm.
she's like, because the thing is you can go and travel the world and spend time with families and people and be there as part of their families And like that's such a gift. I mean, it's just a different way to look at singleness as a gift, which I know you talk a lot about in your book. Um, and that's kind of my thing is like it is a gift. And I don't know how long the season is. You don't know how long your season is, but let's make the most of it. So,
Absolutely.
how would you say you are making the most of your singleness?
Well, it's by serving, it's by being ready and making the most out of it. It is also for me was a mindset change. So I think for many years I was looking for the thing that was wrong. I was desperate. I was looking for opportunities, dates, and I was just desperate. Actually, I wanted to find someone. And then I changed completely, and I said, well, I should just let go of it. And God challenged me, and it was a very difficult process. Like it took me several years to actually come to that point to say, okay, whether I'm gonna marry or not, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. I let go. It's not my will, but if it's your will, I let go. It's fine. And this was such a liberating moment to say, okay, now I can enjoy it and I can maximize this time by serving. By right now, I have a few business ideas. I'm serving here in Cambodia. I just could go. I could travel to the end of the world, literally,
Hmm.
just go to the other side. Cambodia is
And
from
you
your,
do.
yeah, I do, which is great. And well, obviously, I could do it with a family, but it's much more complicated. And I think that's the thing. And now during these pandemic times, also, I just could maximize it. Actually, I had this crazy idea to start a, a virtual hangout. And for those who know me, they know I'm not the virtual guy. That's not my thing. But somehow this idea stuck, and I said, well, let's do it. We don't have any chance. And
Yeah.
now a year later, we're still doing this, and many of the same people show up every single time. So there's a real need, and this is just one example of maximizing my singleness of living.
Yeah.
It's just totally actually more than I would have ever imagined. Like to connect with singles all around the world, from Japan, from Singapore, from India, from Europe, from the US. It's like, wow, this is mind blowing.
That's so cool. So how did you start that? Like how did it become so international?
Um, I think it became so international because I am international. I
It's a good
I
answer.
know a few people pretty much on every continent. So it was funny actually because I just started to reaching out to a few friends and a few friends of friends and not really knowing where this would take us. And my idea is just to do this like this 2 or 3 months during the lockdowns, and then probably we'll go back to normal. That was a bit my idea.
Hmm.
As we all know, it was not like that.
Right?
And yeah, and then what happened is actually those friends invited other friends, and some stopped coming, others came, and yeah, I knew a friend. Well, he's from France, but he lived in Japan for a while. And then I when I went to see him in Japan, I met another friend of him there, and it's yeah, it was crazy. And then another friend from Singapore who lived in Geneva for a while. Well, it's
So it's
we're living
just
in a
it's
global world.
multiplied. It's very global.
It's very global.
Yeah. That's I love that. I love just like a simple idea and then it's kind of multiplied. And I know that's fed some of what we're talking about here, of just like community with singles and that kind of thing. What do you think is one or a couple of the greatest challenges about being single?
One of the challenges I found is in church because it's still unfortunate that in many churches you kind of have the feeling that the ultimate goal is being married. And if
Hmm.
it doesn't happen, even if people don't say it, you kind of feel it that this is the expectation that sooner or later you're gonna marry. And if it doesn't happen, it's like, well, is something strange, or people are a bit suspicious, you know. So I felt
Mhm.
that in many churches, but not in all. I also experienced very good churches who had this vision for singleness, especially for singleness in their 30s and 40s. But I felt that too often singles in their 30s and 40s don't have a space in their church, or like are given enough responsibilities. And somebody even told me actually on one of these calls, on these hangouts, that she did not move into more responsibility in her church because she was single. And
Yep.
this hurts. Actually, this hurts me because, like, well, this is not the gospel. If you look at actually Paul, well, Paul, who was single and he wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, he has a totally different opinion. He says, well, it's not better, it's just different. Singleness is great, being married is great, and that's fine. So that's one of the challenges. The other one right now, I think, in this pandemic is very difficult because it's very difficult to meet people. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of singles are struggling because, yeah, churches are closed down. You cannot travel. In some countries, I know there are even curfews at night. You cannot even go out. Like, for instance, in France, you have to stay home. It's very, very difficult. Also for me right now, I'm still quite lucky in Cambodia. We can freely move around because we're not that actually not hit very hard by COVID, which is great. But
Yeah,
at
it's
this
amazing.
time, it's very difficult to go out of the country because I would love to go back to Europe or to the US to see people, but it's so difficult because when I have to come back, I have to go in do a 2-week quarantine, and it's very expensive. So I just don't go. So I think this is a very big challenge. To not just the relationships, just to not have community, and everything is
Yeah.
virtual. So it's great to meet people around the globe, but it's still not the same.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. I mean, I'm a face-to-face person and we've had to learn how to like have a new normal. A lot of my relationships in this season have been nurtured virtually, and that's made it a challenge. But I want to go back and talk a little bit about the church because I think there is very much a challenge with the way that the church promotes, maybe unintentionally, it kind of makes a hierarchy of life stages by putting marriage at the top, you know? And we live in a world where there's more divorce than ever, and there's more singles than ever. And that's not to say that marriage isn't great and something to shoot for, because I desire that, you desire that. We've talked about that. But at the same time, there's so much freedom and so much flexibility that comes with singleness that it doesn't mean we have less responsibility. It just means we have different responsibilities. Because there is also the challenge of people are like, oh, well, you're single, you have time to do that. Well, not if I have a full life of other things I'm pursuing my passions in. It just looks different than, a lot of my friends who are raising small children and that kind of thing. Um, but one of the things I wanted to, you and I've talked about this before, is for me, I think one of the challenges of singleness from like a personal level is I find it really challenging to make really big life decisions alone. And I lean into God, I lean into my faith so much. I have like exercises and practices that I follow like for discernment. And I have sounding boards. My parents are huge support to me. I have lots of friends, but there's never anyone whose life is affected by my one decision as it would be if it was my spouse. And that can be a beautiful thing because when I talk to my friends, they're like, oh man, if I could just make decisions without my husband or without my wife. But I'm like, I want to make decisions with the person because sometimes they're really big and they feel daunting. And I'm just wondering if you feel that same kind of.
Yeah, I have a similar challenge. I really do feel it as well. Because I had especially a season in my life where I just put off all major decisions, like the big ones, because I was thinking, well, I have to stay flexible enough so that in case somebody shows up, my soulmate, I just could go anywhere and I don't have like a big project. I was really afraid of um, yeah, going for the big thing and making a big change, or say, okay, now I move to the other side of the world.
Mm,
And and I think my other fear was because I got sick of doing it alone.
yeah.
It's I do see the extreme advantage of doing things alone. You don't have you're so flexible. You can actually say, okay, I'll leave tomorrow, which is amazing. But at the same time, I got tired of doing it alone. I wanted to share it with someone. I just wanted to, yeah, experience or have a different perspective, and especially in these difficult decisions. I found it very helpful to get advice of other people or a different perspective. And this is really something I feel that's lacking because I don't have a spouse. So
Hmm.
it's sometimes I have the feeling maybe I'm a bit second guessing, just doing something, but I'm not really sure if it's the right thing or not. I just try and then I go and it kind of works, but I'm still like wondering, was it the right decision or should I have done something else?
Mm,
Yeah, it is very challenging not to lacking actually this life partner, and
yeah.
and it's so much stronger if you're two.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It's like, a cord of three strands is not easily broken. And obviously that throws God in the mix, as the strongest strand. But what is the balance then of, because again, we're older than your average 20-year-old who's talking about their singleness. So we've lived a lot of life. And I know for me, I kind of had to come to this place. This is part of my nature. I'm an adventurer, I'm a risk taker. I don't let the grass grow under my feet, as they say. And so, but I think there's a healthy balance of creating space in your life for someone to come along, as you were talking about, like kind of holding off on some big decisions, and also not living your life in a way that you don't feel like you can live your life fully until you have a spouse. And I feel like I probably tend to live almost more to the extreme of like, I'm just going to go do life on my own because I'm not going to sit around and wait on someone. And I think that can be good. At times, I think it can also be unhealthy. So I think there's actually a really healthy balance. And I'm wondering what your take is on that.
Totally agree. I think there's a balance to find, and I have gone from both. I lived in both extremes. So as I shared before, I had a season where I was more in the balance. I needed to keep that space, putting off all the major decisions, and then I moved on probably almost to the other extreme. And I was like, well, would I really have time actually and energy for someone or not?
Hmm.
I just took on so many projects. I was very engaged in my church. I was very engaged in my professional life. I had just this revelation that I should probably also take more responsibility in my work life and to move the kingdom of God forward in the workspace,
Yeah.
which didn't look so appealing to me before because I was more a ministry person. But then I felt really God challenging me, no, take responsibilities in the workplace. And that's still a bit where I'm at right now, even though I'm serving also in an NGO. But I feel again, actually, this call going back into the marketplace because and yeah, it is really a balance actually to it, and it's a difficult balance to find.
Mm-hmm.
I find it really challenging to find a bit the middle, and right now I'm more in this phase to say, okay, I think probably I have to go a bit back in the middle again to really start to make space. If someone will show up that I have this space, and well, obviously, first of all, it starts with the willingness already to make space, and then when it happens, yeah,
Yeah.
do it.
I'm laughing because that's what older singles get the knock for, is we are too independent. We like what we want. Well, here's the reality. We've had to figure out how to do it on our own. So that's
Yeah.
why we're so independent. And that's I've always been independent, as even as a little girl, but like the older I get, I'm like, "Oh man, like you know more what you want as well." So like you're not willing to settle. So going to what you're saying at the beginning of like people are like, "Oh, your expectations are too high." No, my thing is I kind of say this a lot. Like, I would rather be single than settle. Like,
Yeah.
I've waited this long. I've I'm not going to just like throw it all in now, just for not the right person or whatever. So, yeah, it's a tricky balance. But what what have been gosh, there's so many directions we could go with this conversation. This may need to be part one if we can get our technology working, which has also been a journey which we could tell you about for days. Um, but what about like how has your experience of dating been? And what has that looked like? And where, I mean, wherever you want to take that question, it could kind of go in a lot of different directions. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, dating, well, obviously I did date. I had girlfriends, and it was for me, well, dating for me was a learning experience. I was the guy, maybe just give you some context, like in my 20s, I was not really interested in h- hanging out with girls. I had a lot of good guys, good buddies. We had a good time. We had, even in my later 20s when I was at university, I was really this independent guy. It's like, well, I just want to live life. I want to have fun. Let's go for an adventure. Let's go on a hike. Let's travel. Let's do things. And I was very blessed actually to have this great youth group
Mm,
community. And then as we grew up, we just stick together. And I had my first serious dating relationship actually when I was 29, so quite late. And I
mm-hmm.
had just no idea. I was like a bit, yeah, I really like, now I'm laughing, but it was good. Sometimes it's good to be naive. Sometimes it's good, like I really had no clue how this would work and stuff. And well, it was actually quite a difficult experience because I did not realize that it was a very unhealthy relationship. I thought, well, a relationship is hard, so you have to work and you have to figure things out, which is right. But again, here it comes down to the balance, and I just did not have this balance. I just did not
Mm,
get and did not see all these warning signs. And yeah, finally, I was so worn out, so almost burned out that actually my parents were really afraid of me. It's like, well, you're gonna fall into a depression, like something is wrong with you, David.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was really, and then I really pulled the trigger, said stop, no more, but it was now I think with the background or like with a bit the looking from afar, I think it was a good learning experience because what it triggered is I started doing counseling for
Mm,
several years, and it really helped me to heal a lot of things and a lot of and just understand who I was and
mm-hmm.
what I should do in life. I was also having a lot of insecurity at that time, even at my workplace, and like it was actually a good thing. It was
Mm-hmm.
really a good thing to do that and to get much clearer about myself and my person. And yeah, I had other relationships, but I think obviously it has not been the right thing or the right fit or anything. I think dating for me is hasn't been a success story yet.
I hear you on that one. That's why
Yeah,
we're still single.
that's why we're still single,
Yeah.
obviously. Otherwise, I would have married that person.
Yeah.
I think I'm glad that I did it, that I had the courage actually also to try again, which was
Mm-hmm.
great. And now I think I've made so much progress, and I know I don't just want to go into a new relationship if it's not right. It's like
Yeah.
like obviously it's not my choice to be single, but I'd rather be single and happy than in a miserable relationship. I think that doesn't make sense at all.
I agree. I could not agree more. And it's funny because, I mean, this is kind of cliche to say, but it's true. Like, for the last year in my spiritual direction training, have really been studying the life of Jesus and how Jesus lived. And Jesus was the ultimate single. So we talk about Paul a lot in scriptures as single, but Jesus modeled singleness as well. And he also had a very nomadic lifestyle, and he was very intentional with people in the way that he lived his life, and he lived his life with a lot of purpose. And so I think it's a good model. And, I try to, in my singleness now, it's kind of the same. It's like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get married. I desire that, but, whatever God has, I'm okay with. And I think for me, there was so many times that, like, I remember it was only, this sounds crazy, but it was probably only when I was about 33 that I was like, I should probably start, like, trying to figure out this whole, maybe I should be in a relationship or something. Like, it wasn't on my radar. Like, it was, but it wasn't. And I had guys pursue me and that kind of thing, but I was just like, I'm not interested. Um, but you just kind of you learn and you grow and you just see purpose in it. But there were so many times that I was like, God, take the desire away for marriage if it's not what you have, or let me let it go. You and I probably both know that there's a difference in trying to really be okay with your singleness and really actually being okay with it.
Mm.
If that's what God has. And I feel like I'm finally to that place where I'm okay with it. It's not what I want, but I'm okay with it. Whereas before I was like tricking myself that I was okay with it. So you try to fill it with other things. And anyway, it's a tricky balance, but I think that's an important distinction. So yeah. You have any comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nodding your head.
I think it's a very tricky one. And yeah, I I think also I've been actually I tricked my I yeah I've been tricking myself for a long time, just getting busy, just to forget it, or
Mm,
thinking that I was okay, but actually I was not. Probably every day I was thinking about that, and like just like thinking like who could I pursue, or like like always thinking like, is there some an option or something. But now I have really also come to this space. Yeah, I can really say I'm okay with it. It's not my desire. I
hmm
still have this desire to marry, but I'm okay. Like I'm not miserable. I enjoy it, and I'm totally okay with it.
hmm Yeah, and I'm the same. And I think it's good to be honest about your desires, but also that we trust in God's timing and his perfect plan. And he can orchestrate a story better than any of us can.
Exactly.
Um, and his purposes. So, just as we kind of begin to close, I'd love to hear about your book launch and how can people connect with you? How can people buy your book? Um, and then I have another question I want to ask you after that, but tell us about your book.
Yeah, Single for a Season. I wrote this book because I want to help singles thrive. I think
Mhm.
that's what's most needed. I want to help singles get a new vision for their season. Their season
Yeah.
that's sometimes short and sometimes very long for us, like including ourselves.
hmm
And I want equip singles to make the most and to thrive in this season and to be happy and truly be happy in this season.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote this book, to equip you guys. You can buy Single for a Season on Amazon. It's available both in ebook and paperback format. You can also go on my website. It's singleforseason.com. And
Okay.
please do follow me on Instagram. And I'm on Instagram. It's Dave Bruhlmann on Instagram. And you can also write me an email. It's david@singleforseason.com.
All easy to remember, and I will put all of that in the show notes. So people, if you're listening and want to buy the book, go and support David and follow all his stuff on social media. Um, okay, so this podcast is called The Hope Adventure. So I talk a lot about what God is doing around the world. Hope is like that's my word. It's what I live for, is helping ignite hope in people. So in regards to what we've been talking about, um, where is hope in a season of singleness? Where do you find hope?
For me, it's in two places. Is hope of a better future. There's more. God is still in control,
Mm,
and God works out all the things for the good, even if it's challenging, even if it's frustrating. I think we have to acknowledge that. But there is hope. There is a better future, and I always tell people the best is yet to come.
yeah.
I totally see there is hope. And the other thing is hope. for me, it's you should see it as a gift. Your
Mm,
singleness is a huge opportunity to live something amazing. And this is hope for you, and it's also hope for other people, because I
yeah.
think God gives you this unique time to build his kingdom and to bring hope to the lost, to maybe in your community, maybe in your overseas, as I'm doing, or in the workplace, or in your church, or wherever it might be. You can bring hope to other people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Just hope for a better future. The best is yet to come. And I know people say that a lot, but it's really true. Like when your hope is in God and who he is and the fact that he's leading and he knows what's best for you. He knows what's best for you. He knows what's best for me. And I think hope in singleness too is trusting that it all comes together for his good as believers. I mean, the scriptures talk about that. All things work together for the good of those who believe. And so there's no part of your life that's going to be wasted and that he can't redeem. So there's probably a lot of singles listening that have made big mistakes or things that they really regret in their life, but God can redeem that and use that and weave that into a beautiful story, regardless. So, just one last thing. Is there anything else you just would say to somebody who's single? A bit of encouragement, a piece of advice, anything you want to leave us with on the topic of singleness?
Yeah, my advice to any one of you singles out there is look for a community. Don't
Mm,
do life alone. And I think right now in this season, it's very difficult. I know it's challenging, and the temptation is also to say, okay, I've had it. I just stay home. I just don't do life with other people. But don't do that. And even if it's virtual, even if it's not natural, but do reach out to other people. Um, I live in Cambodia, and I schedule regular calls with friends in Europe or in
hmm
the US, just to have community. And you can be very creative. We sometimes have a drink together and we chat. Just make
Hey,
it
where's
fun.
our drinks? You
Yeah,
didn't
like
tell
we
me to
should have
bring my
a
drink.
drink.
It's a Friday night. I need my glass of wine. I'll have
Absolutely,
it after.
yeah. So yeah, make it
That's a great
fun
idea.
and be creative. Even if your church is not gathering right now, or there are no small groups or anything, there's always a way, I think. Leverage technology. And that's really my piece of advice. And I also want to give you an encouragement, because it feels frustrating at times to be single. It feels frustrating not having a vision and not finding a place. But
Mm,
I believe, and I really know that God, he is very proud of you, and he loves singles, and he
mm,
wants you to flourish in this single season. And you can. I've experienced it myself, and you as well, Bethany.
mhm.
You can flourish in this single season. So um, yeah, there is hope. There is hope, and this is my encouragement. Really, move forward, make the most out of your life, and you will see that you can be single and happy too.
Yes, that's true. And you're not just saying that because you and I both live that and we're testimonies of that. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean it's easy always, and it doesn't mean it's not frustrating or even lonely at times. But
Mhm.
in the midst of that, there is a place to have hope and be excited and just know that God is with you. I mean, for me, it's always as I've traveled the world alone, I've never really been alone. God provides community, but he also provides himself.
Yeah.
He's ever present. So, well, thanks for this conversation, and I think it's been helpful for me. It's just nice to kind of talk about something that a lot of people don't talk about. You and I both talked about. We don't want to be the person that's talking about singleness because then everyone's like, "Oh, that's the single person," and you're like, "No, no, not forever." But hey, God, if it's forever, we're in. But like, please not.
He's
So,
not.
anyway, but thanks for the conversation. It's been great having you on. And if you guys are interested in Single for a Season, definitely go check it out. And like I said, I'm going to link the show notes in there. So thanks, David. It's been great to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Bethany.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of The Hope Adventure. I really pray it encouraged you, whether you're single, married, whatever season of life you're in. And hey, if this was helpful, please pass it along to one of your single friends as a way to encourage them. Also, don't forget, I'm going to link David's book in my show notes and how you can contact him. And lastly, don't forget to check out my new website, www.thehopeadventure.com, and also on Instagram, find me and follow me at The Hope Adventure. Like I said, I have some really, really big news coming up, and I can't wait to tell you. I've got to line some other things up before I'm ready to do that, but I'm super excited to share this with you. And anyway, I just pray that you are blessed and you are finding the God of hope everywhere you look, because guess what? He's with you. He's all around. And sometimes you just got to open your eyes, open your ears, open your heart, and pay attention, because he's right there, I promise. And just a reminder, if you need someone to help you do that, to pay attention, to come alongside of you, to hold space with you, to hold you accountable, to making space to hear from God by asking questions or taking you through some spiritual exercises, I'm your person. I am trained as a spiritual director and would love, love, love to do that with you. I'm also doing some life coaching alongside that as well. So if you're interested, you can connect with me again on The Hope Adventure. You can email me at bethany@thehopeadventure.com. All right, that's it for today. See you right here next time on the Hope Adventure podcast. Bye. Today's music has been brought to you by the Blue Dot Sessions.